So good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Gore, and welcome to this webinar on email security. Just a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent out after it's completed. And also, if you've got any questions, please submit them in the chat. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Francis Gaffney, who will be running the webinar. Francis has a long career working with the government on security matters, so he's a very clever chappie, to say the least. But he's now the director of threat intelligence at Mimecast. Francis won't mind me sharing it. Well, if he does, I'm going to do it anyway. Has a highly qualified background. So, as well as an initial bachelor's degree in chemistry, Francis holds a master's degree in both management information systems and terrorism studies, an international law degree, an MBA in strategic leadership, and a PhD in defence and security. And he's probably a scratch golfer as well, although I don't know. But anyway, there's not much more I can say to that. So over to you, Francis. The show and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your very kind words. Yes, so by way of introduction, I say I joined Mimecast 3 years ago from UK government. I have had an absolutely brilliant career thus far. I can't pretend I haven't had fun. I started off my early career as a teacher in chemistry. That didn't let me harm enough people, so I then moved across into government and started working in what we call psychological operations. And psychological operations is now renamed to information operations, or influence. And you'll see this is going to come up in my talk later when I talk about how I would target people, how I would try and get people to interact with any malicious emails I want to do as a threat actor. I then moved from being in the psychological operations into being a country manager. So I led a country desk for a number of years, then moved across into counter-terrorism operations, mainly on radicalization. So I didn't actually do the frontline kinetic operations. I was on the academic side. And then I moved across to cyber when the UK government said, well, actually, using the same methodologies that we have to identify terrorists, unknown actor, using maybe unknown methodologies, how would we start targeting? How would we understand how to identify these people? Well, then they applied the same sort of methodologies to cyber. So I finished my career with them per se in cyber. I lecture at Cranfield University, one of the visiting fellows there on cybersecurity and terrorism. And I also lecture at Royal Holloway on both those subjects as well. So I do enjoy still academic work, in addition to the actual frontline stuff that we do here at Mimecast. And my research now is looking at AI ethics, the metaverse, and quantum computing, which you'll see come up again in the talk. But let me first get into what I'm going to be covering in terms of how we approach the actual landscape here in terms of cybersecurity. And we use something called the 6 layers. Now, the US and various other countries use 3 layers, but we actually have broken down the cognitive, virtual, and physical into the social, people, persona, information, network, and real. And this helps us start identifying when we do our target audience analysis. So if you look at me as a person, Francis Gaffney, I have different personas. So, I'm a dad. I actually also sit as a magistrate. So I would have parent emails. I would have my judicial email addresses. I've got my academic emails for the 2 universities I lecture at. I also have my Mimecast email. And then I have my personal email. So that one person has got different personas. And if you see me differently, you can see today I'm going to be relaxed. I'm talking to you. We're going to have hopefully a good interaction and chat about things. Whereas you see me as a magistrate, I don't tolerate any messing around in my courtroom. If they're misbehaving, they go down to the cells to have a good, long, hard look at themselves. But you can see how one person has multiple personas. And those personas also sometimes match social groups and additional personas in terms of the social sphere. So I may mix with my magistrate colleagues, but actually I also have a bunch of friends outside, all colleagues from military and government. So I have different social groups. And when I go to target somebody, what I'm actually going to start doing is start identifying those webs, those links of that person. And when you start doing that, you can actually see how vulnerable a person can be, because that information is very, very rich. There's so many different second, third order down the pipeline, as it were, where I can attack and then move up to my ultimate target. So my ultimate target may not be who I attack straight away, but I'll get in through different methodologies. And as I was teaching my students actually only last week about this, everybody is vulnerable. I mean, it takes me between 2 and 4 days to find someone's vulnerabilities, but I will get them. I will find somewhere where, and people have got different pitches and prices they may have in terms of thresholds, but everyone will have a vulnerability eventually. It's just trying to find where I can actually get them to interact with me as a threat actor. Then those people, personas, social groups will share information. It could be by text message, it could be by WhatsApp, it could be by Signal, it could be by Telegram, it could be by Facebook direct messaging, various social media platforms. All other platforms are available, of course. And then it will also be the networks they use to do this. So AWS, or using the main structure of the internet, maybe Tor networks and so on. And then they actually will be physically located in the world somewhere. Now, this is a challenge. So Mimecast, as a rule, we do not attribute. And you think, wait a minute, so I don't really care who's attacking you. And you think, well, that's shocking. What I want to know is why they're attacking you, how they're attacking you. Because out of those hows and whys, I can actually then identify their methodologies. Now, this means that I don't get caught up. I don't get blinkered into thinking that somebody's attacking me of a particular thing. So I put a geolocation in and say, right. Now, this is actually really important of what's going on in the conflict in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus at the moment, because the threat actors are working out of Serbia. They're working out of some of the what we call the neighboring states of Russia. So if I put my geolocation policy to say don't accept any emails from this area, actually I'm actually already setting up myself for attack in a way, because I think I'm then invulnerable. Because I put these geolocations and because I've focused on the who instead of looking at the methodology. So what I actually would do is I'd rather block the techniques than the people necessarily, because somebody else could just use them. And we're seeing this a lot as malware as a service and ransomware as a service, because again, other groups are paying to say, well, actually, can I use your ransomware coding so I can attack? Whereas if I've actually stopped the Conti group from attacking me because I've focused on the who, well, actually, other people are now using those techniques, or I can obfuscate what I'm doing. So, the attribution is not a bit of a red herring, because it is very useful if you're law enforcement, but unless you're law enforcement, it's the why and the how. And I'm going to get into the why quite a lot, because why am I a good target? What makes me a good target? So, and we call this target hardening. How do I harden myself so that I'm not as good a target in the future? How do I mitigate those threats? And we're going to talk about this afternoon, or sorry, this morning. What I'm going to do in this talk, and that's what this slide is to set the scene, is you're going to have a deep dive in a month's time, the 20th of April, on ransomware. So I'm not going to go into ransomware in too much detail, but I'm going to show you how ransomware can be used and what people are doing, so that when you get into that deeper dive, you can actually then explore those things and ask the more interesting questions. But I don't want to get down into the weeds today, only because I'm trying to give you this as an overview of what we're seeing, and how you can actually help yourself and be, as I say, a bit more hardened to what the threats are. So what are we seeing? Well, just a quick overview here is we're seeing the detection levels have actually generally reduced, having had a very, 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 very busy January. And January is usually quite busy because there are a number of different global exercises going on. You usually have, again, not the overflow, but things of the holiday season, the scams. So not just Christmas, but you also have a number of other holidays like Hanukkah. You have the Black Friday. You'd have Diwali. There's lots of things going on at the same time, and people would be using those. The threat actors would be using those to target. And the volume of emails we see would be about 2 to 2.2 billion emails a day. That's how many we see. And so from that, we would get about 200,000 malware detections. And these 200 malware detections are quite clever how they're doing it, because part of what we were seeing in the dark web over the lockdown period in the pandemic was that they were actually targeting analysts' time, so that they knew that the analysts would be working from home, not working in these groups in the office and having meetings and things. And so it's actually tying them up in terms of analyzing what was in the actual emails themselves. So you had the malware had increased, the sheer volume. We actually also then saw these hybrid attacks where you had 2 or 3 different types of malware in the email. And then we also then had, again, the complexity of it. They'd evolved into, seeing more ransomware, much more clever attack methodologies. We are seeing, the impersonation detections being kept at a high level. And I'll explain to you why impersonation can happen when I go into, when I start playing the baddie and we start talking about, the influence operations, as it were. But impersonation is such an easy thing to do. And again, part of that, that identifying your vulnerabilities, identifying your persona, identify your social groups. If I know you well enough, I can start impersonating you. And you do get the people say, and you can hear my voice change, but I do get the people say, well, yeah, but I'm not on social media, so I can't be attacked. And yeah, but people are on social media who are your friends, and they're talking about you. So if you're not on there, you don't know they're talking about you. So the amount of times I've shown people photos of themselves on social media and think, well, I didn't put that picture up. And, well, no, you didn't. Your friend did. But because I can then use facial recognition software such as TinEye or things like that, I can then find you elsewhere on the web as well. So it is a challenge to try and keep your self-protected online. And I always used to advise my intelligence analysts and the troops I used to teach when I used to lecture on this at in government, is that you should really have a social media presence. That doesn't mean you should put everything up about your life, but just have a social media presence so that if people do pop things up, you can actually say to them, look, can you take that down? I didn't want you to put my picture of my family up, or there's a Christmas party and you just happen to be in the group of people. So therefore I now know this is a social group of you because you're in that picture. I now know where you checked in. I know where you were at that particular time, which helps confirm your mobile phone, because I'm geolocating your phone. I now know that actually your phone in that location, that time, confirms that is your phone if I'm having trouble attributing it to you. So there are things that we say. So I used to say to my lads, make sure you are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. They were the popular ones, and they change, but at least you had a presence. You don't have to post your life, but you just had a presence to track others. What particular vertical we're seeing the most activity in is that transport, storage and delivery. And if you look at geopolitically what's going on in the world, well, we're now opening up again after the pandemic. So we are seeing people starting to travel again. We're starting seeing the logistics opening up again. There's obviously the various manufacturers catch up with the demand that people need. So we're starting to see logistics chains being targeted, because that is the richest picking at the moment, because it's the biggest chain we're seeing getting going in terms of this. So this isn't a surprise that we actually did predict that when we come out of this, transport, storage and delivery would be one of the areas targeted. During the pandemic, we saw, healthcare was being targeted because obviously the vaccine and people asking questions about the vaccines, and obviously questions about, the ongoing, virus mutations. So at the moment, we've got Deltacron, as you know, is going through. So Omicron 2 is just finishing, and we've got now detections of Deltacron. You've got the wave going through China, which should hit the UK around about Easter. We've got the spring vaccine now available, and they're now looking at maybe we need a June vaccine. Suggest. So you see these different things in the physical world, that geopolitical things, but actually they have an impact in the cyber, because people are scared, people are nervous, people want to know what's going on. So they look stuff up, they click on links, and they don't always use their personal computers for this, because you're sitting at work. You don't then log out to power up your own personal computer. You actually just use the work computer to see what's going on, and that's when you start seeing these things being introduced into the workplace, because people are nervous. People hear, some of the headlines in the news. So I have a number of countries I still monitor from my background from other places, and I am monitoring those. So will we start seeing China go into Taiwan? Well, no, but I'm also seeing South Korea's fire some rockets into North Korea, in response to North Korea doing their ballistic missile tests. So people want to know about this, and they'll click on links to read about it. And then obviously, because I'm a threat actor, I'm watching the news myself. So I'll start putting up fake sites or sites that I'm hoping that you'll click on and engage with me. And therefore, I can then start identifying these sort of people. Who I can then target. So again, geopolitical events really do have an impact in your inbox. And looking at just last month, we had 83 incidents publicly disclosed. Now, these are ones that have crossed the threshold where they have to, by law, disclose. And I was in the media just recently talking about the SEC are now saying, look, that they're going to lower that threshold, because the more people that know attacks are happening, the better. Now, it is bad for you sometimes as a business, because you're thinking, if I declare that people are targeting me, will it change my brand? Will it show that I am being targeted, and therefore may affect investors? But at the same time, for that cyber hygiene, that wider defense, if people know these things are happening, and you attending this webinar is absolutely brilliant, because I can share with you, and hopefully when we get to the questions and answer section, you'll share with me. But there are lots and lots of things that are going on that we need to be aware of, and the more awareness we can create in the industry, the less likely you are to be attacked, because if you know it's a scam, and that's when the scams fall apart, as it were, when too many people know about it, you know, people are then less likely to fall for it because they think, is this a scam? They're more likely to think it's a scam. But if I'm being very clever, you know, I will actually be targeting who I am going after rather than just doing an opportunistic attack. But, you know, these things pay because opportunistically, statistically, people are going to click on links. So we've seen a number of different things. And again, you can see ransomware, 14 incidences, and ransomware continues to be a challenge. And you can see just in the news today, another school, another local authority has ransomware, and this is their second week without, you know, accesses to their systems. You've got the Greek postal system, you know, they've gone down and they're finding it challenging. And ransomware can happen in so many different ways. You know, you've got the email phishing attempts, and that's how the Black Energy attacks in Ukraine happened back in 2015. But you know, there are so many different ways it can happen. I say, but if we can just protect ourselves through the email route, you know, looking at an email and thinking, well, this doesn't seem right. I'm not expecting an email from this person, so should I really be clicking on that link? And these are the questions you should always be asking. You know, I'm not expecting this email. I'm going to ask questions before I'll engage with it. Because again, I don't want to click on links and allow people to, you know, get access or, you know, to involve me in a discussion. Malicious insiders I'm going to highlight as well, because we're seeing increasing numbers of this. Now, the insider threat is really, really important because it could be with the Great Resignation, so many people are leaving, changing jobs. Now, they don't always have to be malicious insiders. So it could be just someone left and their accounts weren't closed down as promptly as one was hoping to. So therefore, it's left a little vulnerability, you know, a little opening where somebody could get in. It could be, though, that it is a malicious insider. And we're now seeing an increase in what we call access brokerage, where people are selling accesses and will say, well, actually, I know lots of different ways to get into my work computer because I left myself back doors when, you know, the system had shut down. At least I still could do my work. And we're seeing those because why should I pay, you know, or take up lots and lots of time trying to target you? And actually, I could just pay someone, you know, $1,000 and they give me access through their RDP or through, you know, an open printer port that allows two-way traffic. So there's lots of different ways that the insider threat can be achieved. And then once you're inside, well, then I can actually send emails to other people. And again, people returning to the office, they're not sure who's left, who hasn't left, unless they're very, very popular. So you get an email from someone from a company email address, you'll engage with it, not knowing. So that internal movement, lateral movement of threats actually, you know, is quite significant at the moment because, again, people returning to the office and people's accounts haven't been shut down yet, where they may have moved on to other jobs. So that is a concern. And they're the two I just wanted to bring up about this, the ransomware and the malicious insider or the insider threat. It's just because they continue to be successful. They continue to have successes. So how do we see these things happen? So I don't know, say we're going to get some major news tomorrow, something's happening tomorrow. And what you see is, firstly, this opportunistic spam. People would, you know, get lots of emails in their inboxes talking about it. So one, you know, when I was trying to do this as a case study here, it was the Australian bushfires. So we had the Australian bushfires, and I was showing them how you get the evolution of a cyber campaign. And the first thing, you got lots of emails about the Australian bushfires. And people were clicking on links because they were nervous, they were worried. Is the fire near them? Is the fire coming towards them? What's the you know, air quality like? Was there any government help? You know, and at the time, were there filters available for their air conditioning units? Lots of different questions they were asking. And me as a, you know, a savvy threat actor, I'll actually be putting out, you know, these emails with PDFs with, you know, .gov.au so that they know it was safe to click on. But out of those 10, I'd put one that's a dodgy one. So they, you know, I lull them into the sense of security that actually, no, this isn't a dodgy email because they give me legitimate sites to go to, you know, find out this information. And so it lulls them into a sense of security, and they eventually click on that link I want them to. So that's the opportunistic spam. Then it moves into targeted spam. So I'm sending it to people who may have engaged with me, or I'm identifying people who I think this would be a thing of interest to them, like local authorities, public sector, schools. They would be interested, particularly in the Australian bushfires, to see what the government is doing about it. So they may not have heard any internal comms yet, because obviously it's just started, it's all confusion. And then obviously because of these times of confusion, the threat actors exploit that. So I'd use targeted spam and phishing campaigns to write to the heads of schools or the health and safety officers in local authorities to start saying, well, actually, look, these are where you can go for links. These are good sites to follow what's going on in the news. These are the latest graphics or maps to show where the fire is. And so we'd see that. Then we'd start seeing the targeted attack and the spear phishing. So like I was saying, those health and safety officers, well, yeah, they don't actually give me much money or can help me in terms of accesses to the systems. So, you know, then I'll start trying to move to people or authorities that I know are interested, because I see a lot of engagement. from them clicking on my links. So I'll then go to those places, but I'll be now picking on people that I've done a bit of homework on to say, well, actually, should I target the finance officer to say, well, actually, look, you should be doing this, making sure you've got budgets available. The government's going to give you funding, but not yet. So there will be a bit between you getting the grant and you actually having to spend out money. And so I'm identifying the financial officer maybe as somebody who, see what money they've got. I'll be looking at the IT departments to say, look, you need to make sure that you're resilient. Have you got data centers in these areas that could be vulnerable? And so get some interaction with the IT managers, and then I can target them. And then finally, nation states and sophisticated actors come into it. So if this thing has been going on for a while, which they did, you then start seeing those APTs, advanced persistent threats, and nation state. And there's three types of nation state actors. You've got the nation states themselves. You've got nation states sponsored. So at the moment, we're seeing Conti in Russia, ransomware, Conti ransomware being sponsored by the Russian state, as in the Russian state are providing them with targets that Conti can go after. And then you've got state condoned, where in that jurisdiction, there are threat actors, and without necessarily saying you go and do this particular activity, they're allowing them to do that activity from their jurisdiction. So it's like state condoned. They know they're doing it, but they're not targeting the activity of that particular threat actor. So that's the anatomy of the campaign. We see this evolution happen time and time again, and you can actually see the steps through. So when the pandemic started, I made predictions and said by May 2020 we were going to see this. By June 2020 we're going to see this, and you see this evolution happening time and time again. Very rare do you get the advance coming early, because they may not know that this campaign is going to be one that's going to stick, as it were. So looking at what's going on and looking ahead, I know I've got the French presidential elections on the 3rd of April. I know we've got the Australian elections, Prime Minister elections happening before the mid-May. I've got the French Rugby World Cup. I've got the midterm elections in the US. I've got the Irish centenary celebrations happening over this next 12-month period. I'm expecting the US to go and visit, and I expect a UK royal to go and visit Ireland at some point. So these are things I know are going to be coming up, so I can actually start planning not our responses, but our mitigation, how we can start target hardening, making sure I've got more processes available so that I know I'm going to get an upsurge suddenly in malware coming through our landscape. So my team look through these, the elections, the geopolitical, and the Independence Days all the time. And this is just an old slide from the end of January, just so you can see these are the sort of things we're tracking all the time, just because, again, I have to have resource available. So say one of my lads and lasses saying, sir, I'm going to be going on leave during this week. You're like, you're not, because that's going to be a crazy week for us, because you've got the platinum celebrations, the weekend of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of June. That's not a time to be taking leave, because we're expecting a swell of information and happening. So I'm going to change personalities now, because I'm going to become a baddie. Now I love this is my favorite. I miss this so much. I love being a baddie because you don't have any rules. There's me here as director of Mimecast Labs and future operations. So that future operations is when I resource plan. I'm starting to plan already, as I said at the beginning, on quantum cryptography and the metaverse. So I'm actually already making these plans in place. And I have to follow processes. I have to follow government legislation. I have to follow just HR practices. And I can't make my team work 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they grumble. I give them as much sugar and ice cream as I can, but they still grumble. But a baddie doesn't have to do any of this. So let's go back to my early days, and I'm looking now at this triangle. And this triangle is the influence triangle. You'll see it being used in so many ways. We use this a lot in psychology. So if you look at an advert on telly, what they're trying to do is influence you. They're trying to change your behaviors, your will, or your capability. Let's look at going through a supermarket checkout. That's where I put the sweets, because I know the little kids are going to use their pest power, pulling on mummy's and daddy's coattails to say, look, there's a sweetie, can I have it? And that's going to try and change your wills and your behaviors, because there's the child trying to change your will that you weren't going to buy sweets. Well, now you are, because you're spending so long in the queue. The child is actually able to use that pest power on you. So these are the things marketing, advertising do, and obviously people don't even know they're doing this triangle because it's natural to them. But I actually am focusing on this triangle a lot, because me as a threat actor, I want to change one of these behaviors to influence you. I want you to do something, and I'm going to try and get you to do that thing, because again, ROEs, my own returns on investment. So it's going to take me time to target you, and I want to get that money back. People never think about people like me as a baddie. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got kids to put through private school. People just don't think of ransomware, threat actors. And so, I am trying to get money out of you. I'm trying to get something out of you, and it's just data. I can sell that data to somebody. So there is sometimes always maybe a cost. Yes, you do have the access brokerage and the disgruntled malicious insiders, but it's not them the threat actor. The threat actor is the one who's buying that information off them. So eventually there is some sort of cost, whether it be drugs, whether it be munitions or money. That's what it all comes down to eventually when the threat actors cash in. So to be able to do this influence on you, I need to do a pattern of life analysis, and that's what we call it, pattern of life analysis. You may also hear it target audience analysis. You may hear it as COG identification, center of gravity, and you may hear it as KDMs, key decision makers. So what I'm trying to do here is identify who I need to go after. So I'll go to your company website. I'll have a look at your website, and it tells me, sometimes has a rogue gallery. It says, here's such and such. They're the CEO. Our ethos is contact us. So what I'm going to do is use the names that you've provided me to start building that web. So I'll put those names down on a piece of paper, and I'll start looking at each of those. And out of those, I'm going to start getting those little, remember the persona and social interactions. I'll start looking for you on social media. If you're not on social media, and I've used all my different techniques I can, I'm going to create a profile on your behalf. And because I now know your social groups and your work colleagues, I'll start inviting them into that social media presence. And that way I'm impersonating. I'm going to try and find photos of you. And if I can find photos, I can find other places on the web, because I'll start finding your family, where you went to a wedding, where there was a christening, where there was a party, such and such grandparents, they put pictures up like crazy, and children do. They're horrific for doing this, the children putting things up. So there's lots and lots of photos, it's a very information rich environment. And what I'm trying to do is build up a pattern of life. What are you doing? Where do you check in? So me, you can see me on screen. I don't drink, I don't smoke. So you're thinking, gosh, how has he got so large? Ice cream, that's my weakness, and I will tell any government secrets for top of Haagen-Dazs. So I know my price, I know my threshold. But what I'm trying to do is find out what motivates you in life. And there's people apparently that go out jogging and cycling, they exercise, and these crazy people do this quite a lot. And they log on to things like Strava and Zwift and all these other things. And so I can actually start seeing those little pathways, where they go jogging. And by looking at those, I can start seeing, well, they're jogging around this area. This means that's an area of interest for them. Could it be where they work? Could it be where they're visiting a friend and that's where they go jogging from? Could it be their own home area where they're jogging from there? So I'll start building up that pattern. Where do they check in? Okay, here's some restaurants they use. That's interesting. They keep checking into these little restaurants around this area. So even though you may not put, on your LinkedIn or social media saying, lives in Salisbury in Wiltshire, I can actually start seeing that that's where the collection of your check-ins are, or where all the photos of your friends keep tagging you in these pubs and restaurants around that area. So that must be where you are, because your friends are tagging you even though you're not there. So I'll start seeing where you hang around, where you check in. And the next step I would do then is I will send you a voucher from that restaurant that you keep going to. So, you go to, say, I don't know, Hawksmoor, Air Street in London quite a lot. So I'll send you an email, spoofing them. And instead of saying Hawksmoor, instead of the M, I'll use an R and an N and put the letters close together. So I'm doing a hieroglyph, hieroglyph sort of, thing on the website. So you think it's from Hawksmoor. And I'll say, look, because of a loyal customer, you come so often, I'll have the dates that you checked in. Look, please feel free to have 15% of your next meal. It's been very lovely of you to do this. And you're thinking, Hawksmoor is quite expensive. You think 15%, that's quite a significant amount. I'll download that voucher and bring it with me next time. And behind that voucher, obviously it's encrypted. There'll be some sort of malware behind it. Or if it's a link, I'm going to do something HTML smuggling. I don't know if you've seen this, great technique where, you have the little JavaScript blob in it. So even though it may have gone through your threat detection boundary, you click on it, and then that's when it encodes. Mimecast stops that, by the way. So HTML smuggling doesn't affect us, but it does others. But it's actually a lovely little piece of clever little piece of writing my threat actor colleagues have done. And I'll put one of those HTML smuggling links in as well, in case you didn't want to download the voucher because you're a bit more savvy, but you click on the link and they'll bring you to a page saying, yep, your voucher's thing. We just need to know your name and the date you want to come to the restaurant, and we'll do this. So I'll try and get you to enter some sort of credentials into it. It could be you're running So, you know, I'll send you vouchers off at your local JD Sports for ASICS trainers, running trainers. Me, it just send me free vouchers for Ben and Jerry's, and I'm sorted. But each person will have their own, not vulnerability, but their own interest that I'm going to try and tweak. It could be children. Now, children are, as I say, absolute target-rich environments for me because people care about these children, and so therefore they invest in them. And it could be that your little hobbit is at school and you do the lovely Christmas picture or the first day at school picture, or one of your friends has done it, you know, because even though your daughter's son is not in the picture, they're in the picture with their friends going to school. And what I'm going to do is, you know, identify what school it is. So I'll just look again in those local areas to, you know, see the badge, see where the uniform is. And when I'm lecturing this at university, I show up on slides just random pictures. I'll just type in first day of school, and you just see, you know, go to images tab, and you just see lots of pictures of kids standing in front of their front door. And I did this to my colleague Tweeds when I wanted to send them a present. And it took me ages, but I did it eventually. But what I was doing is just building up all the different information on how I would get things. So I sent them a parcel one time, and you know, I zoomed in on the parcel, and this is what I do: zoom in and then trying to get the postcode from the parcel. And then, you know, you get to the front door, or I go to the car, look at the reflection in the car to see what the number is on the outside of the house. There's lots of different things you would do, but the easiest one to do is flip the photo over, and on the back of the photo is all the metadata, and it tells me, you know, geolocation. So it actually has a GPS location. It tells me the shutter speed, even it tells me the I/O, so the operating system the phone was using when the picture was taken. So again, I can see that you actually haven't updated your you know, your various phone, so I can actually think, well, actually I know the vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities. You're still using operating system 7, we're now on 8, 7, 12, 15, whatever, and I know that you've got a legacy system. So, you know, the photo can give me a lot as well. So from that information, I now know what school your hobbit goes to, and I will then now go to the school website and start looking for photos, and you'll see, you know, Cynthia and Melody are playing, you know, the quarter group, you know, going toward the little sticks. They go around the ballet lessons. It could be hockey, it could be whatever. And what I'm going to do is just look for photos of your child on the school website. And the school are very good. They don't name the children, but that doesn't matter because I've got TinEye. I can actually find that photo of that child elsewhere on social medias, and I will have their name. People call their child you know, X or F, or give the first initial. But somebody is always going to give it away somewhere in the comments section saying, gosh, doesn't Melody look lovely today? I think, brilliant, that's her name, Melody. I now know it's Melody. She goes to this school, and I can start building up that information more and more. And then I'll send you photos, say of her hockey, and I'll just say, oh, well, look, I'm another parent. I was at the thing. I didn't see you at the pitch, but I thought you saw this photo, your daughter, she played so well, but you know, here you go, there's a picture, and don't mind me. And obviously you'll download that picture with the encrypted malware behind it. Now, I'm in your home system. You think, well, yeah, but you're still not in my work system. But then what I'm now going to do is start looking at your house. I'm going to start targeting you as a person, because I'm now looking at how I can do a man-in-the-middle attack, how I can actually get you to go via the office on a route I want you to. So I know your office processes are using VPNs to, you know, connect to your office computer. I'll make sure your VPN doesn't work in your house, and there's lots of different ways I can do that, because you've taken a lovely picture of your house in front of the, you know, fireplace at Christmas. So I now am looking, and I'm just going to show you, flick ahead to one slide here. And this is just a thing we helped one of the American police departments with, showing what information is on the back of a car. And I can see that it's, again, a massively rich environment. I'm standing here in my office. There's nothing behind me here. But usually when I do this from home, you can actually see everything behind me. And that's what I'm doing on Zoom calls. I'm looking behind people, looking at, you know, what phone they've got, what printer they've got, what TV they've got. You know, because again, these things aren't necessarily supported after 2 years. So you may have a Samsung GT TV, and after 2 years, they don't take the firmware anymore. So therefore, I now know existing vulnerabilities that have been declared. Because you've got an old TV and it's a smart TV, I can actually get into your system that way through the TV. It could be the printer port, you know, the printer port's open. It could be a man-in-the-middle attack where I'm actually going to have a pineapple in the back of my car, and a pineapple, again, I would show you if I was at home, but it's a nice little device I just plug into my laptop, and it picks up all the, you know, local 3G, 4G, and 5G, and you go through my antenna, and then I connect locally. So my antenna generates a bigger signal. You connect to me, I do the three-way handshake, then talk to Vodafone. But actually, you're going through me at the moment. Because you're going through me, I'm now obviously going to interrupt and try and get onto your phone. So just looking at the back of this car, you can see that it's a large family. Good. So that helps me when I start identifying who I want to go after. And, you know, I know you have kids or whatever. Yeah, you see there the camping thing. I'm going to look at your petrol cap actually as well, because at the moment, up in Yorkshire, it's £2 a litre for some fuel. So I'm going to be siphoning off. So, if you don't learn anything else today, make sure you get a lock-in petrol cap, because you're going to start seeing lots of overnight thefts of petrol at the moment. Sometimes people have the sticker of where their kid goes to school. My daughter's an honours student or whatever. Sometimes people in America try and personalise their number plate, and others I can actually just do a number plate check. When you can actually check with DVLA. There's certain ones that you can use for $3.95 and they give me your address. I can see the children play sports, they're football, so I know that mummy and daddy or whoever looks after them is going to be away Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings for matches and things. So that'd be a good time if I want to start doing things to your property, and so on and so forth. So you can see these bits and pieces. If you've got a picture of a dog on the back, that's a handy one, because obviously at least when I go near your house, the dog will give me away. So this pattern of life analysis, I've spent a little while on it, but I really just want to push that. It takes about 2 to 4 days on a target to get a nice, rich idea of who they are. And then I'll start social engineering. So that's when I'm going to start getting you to do those things in a triangle: your capability, your will, and your behavior. So what are the ways I can actually then get you to interact with me? And this is how radicalization works. This is how advertising works. Two totally opposite examples, but they work in the same way. I'm trying to influence you. I'm trying to get you to change your capability, will, and behavior. And if you see any of my intelligence reports my team write, we don't write emotive words. We keep emotion out of it. So I wouldn't say the Putin regime. I will say the Putin administration, because regime, I'm already giving you words. I'm already trying to influence. And that's what I'm always telling my students and my analysts to look out for, is where you are showing a bias, a cognitive bias, because by you using these words, you are already influencing. Now, you are all decision makers in your own rights. And me as an intelligence analyst, I would be an unfaithful servant to you if I'm trying to push, scare you into ransomware because, I want you to buy that product. No, I'm just going to lay out the facts for you. And then you, as the decision maker, you've got your own risk appetite, because you'll have a certain thing you allow to happen, but also you'll have a budget, and you're not going to be able to afford best in class necessarily. Some can, some can't. So based on your risk appetite and your budget, you then can make a decision. Where if I've been an unfaithful servant by trying to push my intelligence, by trying to sell my intelligence, by trying to sensationalize my intelligence, that hasn't helped you at all. And so, like say the UK government, because of Chilcot inquiry, I'm just looking for it in my wallet. Look at every time we have these probability yardsticks, and you'll see this in all my reports. I'll say it's likely, highly likely. So likely says it's 55 to 75%. Now, if you remember the Iraq, the inquiry came from, they changed the words likely to highly likely. And the likely, you can see here, is 55 to 75%, whereas highly likely is 80 to 90% chance. And we have our own risk appetite. So you're thinking, gosh, if this is an 80 to 90% chance, we need to make sure we start doing some sort of forces in the area. We start to put military in. We need to pre-position our forces. So going from likely to highly likely changes our posture. And that's could be the same for yourself. If I oversell the intelligence, you then may end up taking some sort of action, changing policies, shutting down, doing X, Y, and Z. And the 4 ways you treat risk, the tolerate, treat, terminate, and transfer. So you would actually then may have to implement one of those 4 ways of dealing with risk, because I've sensationalized my intelligence. So my intelligence always has to be honest and within context, because if it's not, it makes you then change. So that's social engineering. I know this, so therefore I'm going to try and make sure that the threat I do for you, and this is what Putin's doing, just pushing, because he wants the West to get involved so that he can have a more symmetric war, because at the moment he's seen as the aggressor, whereas he wants to be seen as the person who's actually stopping the West from being aggressor to him. So you can see this social engineering, this communications, this messaging that's going to be happening all the time. So how do we protect ourselves? We've gone through all of that, but how do we protect ourselves? Well, each way of protecting has its own vulnerabilities. You come up with an idea, I'll work out a way of breaking it. It happens, doesn't it? So, I drove a Range Rover. I drive a Range Rover, so I'm going to make sure I've got, the Cat 3 lock on it. I'm going to make sure that I have, tracker system on it. So even though the car itself is an amazing car and, the top in class or whatever, I'm actually still going to add things to it to make sure. So you have an amazing, email system or protection that you have, and you'll then do the add-ons to make it that bit more robust based on the intelligence, based on the things that are attacking you. So you'll have your IOCs, what's attacking you, say, well, actually, I'm concerned about this because this is a new threat. Okay, I've got this package, but I now need to add this on to make sure I'm protected. So that Range Rover, we now start seeing more and more of these things happening to Range Rovers. So therefore, I'm going to target harden. So defense in depth is quite key. And this point here is actually how we would stop a nation state. So when you do look through the slide deck later, have a look through, because people worried about nation states that we're now seeing play more and more, or state sponsored or state condoned. So Conti ransomware are now, recognized as being state sponsored. So what are the ways I can stop a nation state? Because it's slightly different to the APTs and slightly different to our normal threat actors. But you can see identify key personnel, and target harden. So when it comes to kind of conflict, all the different people who have our missile codes are suddenly protected. And when I had to do an operation out in Kosovo, suddenly there was a policeman standing outside my house looking after my family. So there's lots of different things will happen. And so identify your key people. How do you target harden? Well, it's nice to talk about your people because we've got to be pragmatic, but there's giving away information, and there's, presenting who this person is. And I've been looking at a doctor up in Stoke, and the different sites that talk about him. When you put all that information together, it's become such a rich environment. He's a good friend. We went to school together, and I was showing him how much information is about him out there when you actually put it together, and he was quite surprised. And that was not just a doctor, but that was just a doctor, going to work each day. And just go through these different things. There's zero trust. When someone leaves your company, they're not dead to you. They are, but they're not dead to you. But you should start closing their accounts. So when they leave the office at 5 o'clock, that means their account should be finished. They shouldn't be able to access their email systems or anything after that time, because they're no longer your employee. So there's different things like that. Looking through your supply chain, you've got the most amazing cybersecurity measures you have in place, but unfortunately, you employ a third party that actually doesn't have any cybersecurity, and therefore you've got the weakest link in the chain. Well, that's now your new cybersecurity posture, that chain, because that's the one I'm going to go after because I've identified it. So this layered security is important. Make sure that your hardware is obviously checked. Make sure that it hasn't got vulnerabilities in it. Software, have you patched? Patching itself has got these complications to it, because obviously putting a patch in something doesn't necessarily fix everything, but make sure you are up to date as you can. People, I've stressed that effectively in this last 40 minutes, and hopefully you've seen that the last 40 minutes into people, because they're your biggest vulnerability, but your biggest asset. So if I can actually make my people aware of the things that are going on around them, and we have to keep reinforcing it. So we look at anything between 4 weeks and 6 weeks. I used to teach chemistry, as I said, and you walk out the lesson, the kids have forgotten everything I've just told them. But you need to keep reinforcing. If you remember Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5 education, it's a repetitive curriculum we have in the UK, because you're trying to reinforce that learning, because people forget, skill fade. Processes, again, if I can understand your processes, I know that you use the FAIR model for risk assessment, or I know you use BCP from Axelos, then I know your processes, so therefore I know how you're going to respond. And then what partners, who are your partners? Who do you look at for support or have subcontract out to? We produce lots of different papers, and we operate in the 3 spaces, as you can see there: tactical, operational, and strategic. So I do the strategic, I do the looking ahead, and I say the metaverse and the quantum, which is I'm just going to talk about just very, very briefly, because the quantum vulnerabilities we haven't necessarily identified, because the US government are on the lead on it at the moment for us, is looking at who is going to be the new cryptographic standard in that quantum space. And there's still 6 different quantum cryptography standards they're looking at. So we don't know that yet. But if I'm doing my 3 to 5 year planning, which I am, I need to start identifying in myself what systems are going to be quantum vulnerable. So I'll have P0 to P7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then that P0 space, that will be where I hold my customer information, my personnel information, maybe the crypto keys I actually have existing in my system. Then I go down to P1, and these will be, yes, these are still sensitive, but these are the ones I'm going to, and eventually it gets down to P7, which could be my door pass. I'm not saying that should be in level 7, but that'll be the information that's held in the door pass, which passes are allowed to open the doors. And what I need to do is just prioritize those out, so that when we start getting the standards, I can start applying. Now we've started planning this for us, and we're a company, as under 2,000 people, but it's still going to take us between 12 and 18 months to do that audit of how to identify the P0 to P7 systems. And we're doing it bit by bit. And obviously, as new things come in, as new software is changed or patched, that then changes, its quantum vulnerabilities. But we are starting to do it, and we're advising customers to start looking at quantum vulnerabilities. So we haven't got the answer yet, but we can start doing that planning, so that when the answer comes, we know the first, second, third, the order of which we're going to introduce it into our organization. The other one is Metaverse, because people are now using it. So Mesh for Teams, you've seen, launched last June. And it's a similar thing that I'm now sitting with VR goggles on, I'm sitting with headphones, and I slide a piece of paper across the desk. And that's like me sending you an email. So it's actually just built on an email thin client, but it's in the metaverse. So how do I start protecting those sort of things? How do I stop making sure that the documents are signed? How do I check that you are who you are, who you say you are in the metaverse? So, we're going to have these virtual passports. So you've seen the UK government 2 weeks ago stood up a virtual passport style system, that digital recognition, so that when I move from one metaverse to another metaverse, I bring my personality with me. I know that when I've been fighting trolls in World of Warcraft and now go into my Teams environment, I actually am the same person. Lucinda the troll, and then Francis the director. Yeah, and then I move into my, because we already do virtual courts, as you know, from pandemic. So when I'm sitting in my virtual court, yes, it's a video conference, but actually when we process drivers for speeding and things, that's like 8 magistrates in the room just clicking on different things. So, it's a virtual environment. So these are important documents, because obviously that helps us start doing our forward planning. So we don't just report the news. Yes, it's important to understand what's happened to you, why it happened, because obviously then I can project on to say, well, actually this happened to you and this was why, therefore this may happen to you in the future. And so these are my future concerns. Access brokerage is up there. It's really concerning. Extortion DDoS. So this is a type of malware, ransomware, where instead of stopping your data, encrypting it, they just stop access to your sites. We saw this attempted in the Olympics. That if you don't give us X amount of money, Bitcoin, we will make sure that the 100 meters final is not broadcast. Those sort of things. Ransomware is always going to be a concern while it still pays, while people still pay the ransoms, and it is a worry, but people are still paying the ransom because you need to get back to continuity, you need to get to normalcy as soon as possible. But obviously, people paying the ransoms, then the threat actors will still continue doing what they're doing. Shadow IT and hybrid working, because obviously as we start returning to work, people still want to stay remote working. They don't want to come into the cities and things, and obviously they've enjoyed working at home. So this shadow IT, this legacy IT, we've seen a lot of, because they're not patched and not necessarily syncing with the home computers. And again, people have downloaded lots of things on their local terminal or end user that maybe obviously open them up to vulnerabilities. Increase in attempts to capture data in transit, because obviously lots of people are still remote working, so they're logging onto their local Wi-Fi at Starbucks or whatever. So if I can sit in there, and those of you who are IT, used to play in this world, I used to sit in Starbucks, with Firesheep, how we used to do with the Pringles tin to try and increase your reception of as people putting passwords through the ether. We're going to start seeing an increase in cyber domain concerns driving legislation. We've seen that already. So the SEC, guidance that's they're trying to push to the US courts. We've seen this because people worry about cybersecurity, and if we don't behave as cybersecurity professionals, I don't mean behave, but we don't do things well enough, legislation will come in and tell us to do it. And legislation, as we've seen in other parts, can sometimes have lots of loopholes and make it more complicated for us as the defenders. Obviously, the others don't have to obey those rules, the attackers. Malware as a service, we're seeing loads and loads of that as well, and third-party attacks. So that's the end of my 45 minutes. I'm just going to obviously open up the floor to any questions, because obviously, I'm interested, to hear what you have to say, what you're seeing, and your experiences. So please.
Thank you, Francis. One of the questions that came up before the event that someone asked that couldn't attend was they hear a lot about the major attacks on large companies and that. Is there an increase in attacks on sort of smaller and medium-sized businesses in line with the increase in malware and ransomware to the larger companies as well?
Yeah, so we see those because they don't necessarily pay the big bucks, but when we saw in the physical space, so this is before the pandemic started, in the physical space you saw crime, and these criminals weren't able to get out because curfews were imposed and so on and so forth. We saw a lot of them move online, so we saw lots of fraud by misrepresentation, by fraud taking place online, and these people weren't necessarily IT literate or IT experienced, so they went to the malware as a service, and so we saw a huge uptick in people buying the malware as a service so that they could actually enter. And because they were inexperienced, these opportunistic attacks, they would start on the small, medium business, the SMBs, or the ones that they thought would be easier, low you know, in terms of money return, but actually it'll be easier for them to do. And the money is quite important because, again, in courts, it also is a different sentencing. So, you know, those of you say criminal damage, that's a nice easy one. Criminal damage over £5,000 suddenly gives me greater sentencing powers. Under 5,000, not so much. So these SMBs are actually attractive to the lower level threat actors, and I would say the more opportunistic. So we're not talking about APTs and, you know, advanced. We're talking about the opportunistic attacks, and it would be the SMBs, because they wouldn't necessarily have invested as much in their cybersecurity as, you know, a bigger you know, organization. So therefore, these attacks, these malware as a service, would be more likely to happen. Doesn't mean they will happen, just more likely.
Excellent. The National Cybersecurity Centre has recently sort of brought out more guidance, and that might even be you, Francis. But just wondering, you know, would that be a good place for people to start to look at how they can implement their cybersecurity?
100%. So the NCSC, and I actually also track ASC, the Australian Signals Directorate, and they've got the ACSC, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. You track the CISA in America. If you look at all those, they're actually very good environments, because, you know, you do sometimes see follow the sun style attacks. So you still start seeing some sort of attacks occur in one part of the globe and then spread to other places. So the NCSC, massively important. And then they've got a brilliant thing called CISP, the Common Intelligence Sharing Platform, which is brilliant for us because we can then go on there, and it's like a chat room in a way, but I'll upload some of our documents that are not commercially sensitive to share, you know, with other colleagues in the CISP area. Today is the IGPP conference across in the Oval. I'm literally going there this afternoon to present, and it's meeting up with my colleagues from Cabinet Office to talk to them about things that we're seeing, because we share all the time. You know, when they see something we put on LinkedIn, I know I'm going to get a phone call a few seconds later from one of the ladies in the office, say, what are you seeing? And I'll start sharing, and then they'll put it up on the NCSC website so that all of us can actually then be that bit better to, you know.
Okay, excellent. Question from Patrick: wouldn't it be just as bad to have pages people you follow on LinkedIn, as that potentially advertises products you might use and any vulnerabilities associated with it? How far do you reasonably go before you become completely paranoid?
Patrick, that is an amazing question, and it is, and I'm glad you asked, because obviously we have to be pragmatic, don't we? We have to at some point live in this world. So you're right. I mean, I don't just accept any connections, you know, necessarily, because, you know, sometimes people are malicious in that anyway, because obviously they're then trying to link in with you, talk about who they are, and you're thinking, well, I don't know who you are. Why should I share documents with you? So Patrick, you are 100% right, and that's why, you know, you don't necessarily have to put everything up there, the crown jewels. And really, the bottom line, I always say, what I would put up on social media, I should be happy putting a poster outside my house. So the same information I put up outside my house, I will, you know, that I'll put up on social media, because it just adds up. I mean, a friend of mine, bless her, she just she's got counting down to her cruise. She's doing, you know, she's going on a 14-day cruise, and she's got 21 days to go. So if you want, I mean, obviously you know where she lives, it's easy because it's Guernsey. So everyone's going to go visit a house, and I do. So I usually just open the letterbox, put a watering can into the corner, and then throw watercress seeds. So when she comes back, she's got some, you know, fresh food in her doormat. But people advertise they're going on holiday. You're thinking, why would you wouldn't put a poster outside saying going on holiday in 21 days for 14 days, please burgle me? But people put that on social media. So yeah. Patrick, yes, we have to be pragmatic. We have to live in this world, but it's just not giving them that low-hanging fruit. Let someone else be the low-hanging fruit. So you put your information up, but yeah, sell someone else down the river.
Absolutely. And maybe this will be a good final one to finish on. If you could distill your fears into one key thing, what would it be?
At the moment, I think it's ransomware. At the moment, you know, future fears, yes, but I think ransomware is the thing, and that's why it's actually we talked about this before the call. It's really good that the next talk is on ransomware, because that's the closest crocodile to my canoe at the moment.
Excellent. Let's see if there's any more. Our company, an SME, has recently been held to ransom with our domain name having been stolen. We didn't pay, and 3 months later have just recovered it. How important is it for us to know how they did it?
Yeah, so remember, you know, not focusing on the who, leave that to law enforcement, but it is actually important to see how it happened so that you're not vulnerable again. You know, did you actually then close that route into you? You know, so yes, it is important. I still, so this is part of threat intelligence I call reporting the news. You know, the IOCs, it's happened. You know, it's like raining yesterday, you got wet. You know, how do I stop myself from getting wet tomorrow? Well, it worked out that actually I didn't get wet from rain. I got wet from a leaking, you know, drain pipe. Then at least I know not to get wet the next day the same way. So, you know, when we do that predictive, you know, piece on what's going to happen in the future. We actually have to use historical evidence to make that prediction. So I actually think it's very, very important. You know, it is worth the investment to try and work out how it happened so it doesn't happen again.
Okay, I think I'll pass back to Michael now to round off.
Okay, thank you very much, Rich. First thing I just wanted to say is thank you, Francis. That was, I've just made some notes here. So I was going to say, it's probably one of the scariest webinars I've ever been involved in, whether speaking or listening to, but also deeply reassuring, you know, that we've got tools, all of us have tools to be able to combat this relentless assault that we have on us. Let me put my camera on for this, that we have every single day. But I think the message that I carry away from this is about personal responsibility. You know, some of the things that you've highlighted there, I would never have thought of in a million years. But it just makes you think about what it is you're doing yourselves. We can have the best tools in the world, you know, but if we don't take some of the responsibility ourselves, we'll never get anywhere. So thank you for that, Francis. I find that to be so interesting. And I hope everybody else did as well. As mentioned earlier on, we have the next element of our webinar, which I believe is on the 20th of April, which is ransomware, which has just been highlighted by Francis. So thank you very much for everybody that's attended today. I hope you found it useful. I know that I have, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. But once again, Francis, thank you very much indeed. That was terrific.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye, everybody. Goodbye.